Points the Russian military is paying dearly for its mistakes when it invaded Ukraine. According to experts and journalists on the ground, the Russian military is failing, paying the price for its own mistakes, organization inferior, contemptuous. Some units have deserted phenomenon. Besides on-the-spot reportage on the heroic fighting of Ukrainian army and people against Russian invaders, the newspapers also reviewed the balance of forces and impact with other countries in the area. In the neighboring Baltic region, for example, Monde said, people prepare a 72-hour bag of essential items to survive for 3 days if war breaks out. This luggage weighs about 10 kilograms and is worth €180. The 1950s bunkers for high-ranking communists have been remodeled. In Romania, Poland, Moldova, people worry about food storage, gasoline sales are limited, many people worry about renewing their passports so they can leave when needed. Figaro commented, the Russian army is failing, have to pay for their own mistakes. According to the observations of experts and journalists on the field, the Russian army is poorly organized and is deserting. Last Saturday, March 12, 3 people, who introduced themselves as Russian officers to Western journalists, said they had parachuted in time when the plane was shot down by Ukraine and became prisoners. They were assigned on February 23, the day before the operation began. Maksim Sergueïvitch Krishtop, lieutenant colonel of the 47th Regiment of the Russian Air Force, said that he was ordered to destroy military infrastructure until March 5. Was asked to shoot at civilian targets. Alexeï Golovenski, a pilot of the Russian Navy based in the Crimea and having fought in Syria, said his superiors confirmed that Ukraine's air defense was almost non-existent. This young officer confessed, I was pushed to death 100%. All 3 said that they completely volunteered to attend the press conference, because they could not stand the thought of killing their Ukrainian brothers. Kiev propaganda. Figaro considers their testimonies very credible, confirming the information that experts have about the interior of the Russian army, disorganization, desertion, demoralization. Christo Grozev, a famous Bulgarian journalist who is on the front lines, has many contacts and thanks to the relay technology of the Bellingcat investigative journalism network, says that the Russian army is in a chaotic, non-strategic situation. The commanding officers communicated by unsecured cell phones. Due to airstrikes on Ukrainian supply posts, they disabled the Russian military's encryption system. This was because the operation was planned to last only 3 days. The army sent to Kiev, consisting of many police and federal guards, was not prepared for fierce battles but aimed at taking over the city once defeated. Ukrainian government base. There were countless logistical problems, and the mobilization of 4 generations of tanks. Every overheard conversation shows that the commanders understand that it has failed, but can the top see the reality? According to Grozev, the decisive moment will come in the next 10 days or so. Even without admitting defeat, Russia will try to freeze the situation in order to gain at least a territorial advantage in the occupied territories. He did not rule out a desperate act of the like-minded, with chemical or atomic weapons. Expert Louis Gauthier, former Secretary of State in charge of Defense and Security of France, warned on Les Echos if Europe does not wake up, will become prey for the invaders. He commented that the modernization of Russia's military is only halfway there, it is a leopard skin army. Moscow has made great efforts on nuclear and conventional weapons, new types of Russian missiles. Among the most efficient in the world. But to keep it a secret and to save money because it's expensive, Russia doesn't put these on the Ukrainian battlefield, just all kinds of old and new tanks, normal artillery, logistics is poorly organized, and fighter jets are not enough to support infantry. To break Ukraine's resolve, Russia can strike harder. The problem now is how to negotiate a de-escalation, so as to prevent other martyr cities from being engulfed by the rain of bombs. Mr. Gauthier criticized the West for allowing Vladimir Putin to walk in the wilderness since 2014. On liberation, Ms. Cécile Coudriou, president of Amnesty International in France, emphasized the need to collect evidence of war crimes to one day present before an independent court. Crisis Evidence Lab team is still diligently processing thousands of documents, testimonies, photographs, satellite images. For example, on March 3, 8 bombs were dropped on densely populated areas of Chernihiv during when there were no military facilities nearby, killing 47 people and injuring many more, all of them civilians staying at home or queuing for food. Laekos noted, this was the first time war broke out in a country with so many nuclear power plants. Olivier Gupta, Director General of the Association of Atomic Safety Regulators in Western Europe, ASN, warned that in the event of a disaster, it would be necessary to evacuate residents in the world. 20 kilometers in diameter and measures in place to protect people at a distance of 100 kilometers. On the immigration front, Le Monde found that in just a few days, a fortress Europe had changed radically from the influx of people fleeing from Ukraine. If in the past Europe opened its arms to refugees, separatists in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, then Vietnamese and Chileans, in recent years walls have been raised, policies have been put in place to prevent immigrants from Syria, Afghanistan, Africa. Now suddenly there are the first war victims in Europe since World War II, and 27 EU countries opened their doors to Ukrainians. In just 2 weeks, the world changed. Laekos describes how the Ukrainian war redrawn the world map, although the war never ended. Not only is Putin no longer a role model, he has become an anti-pattern, he is a testament to the danger to the world, as a cold-hearted dictator raises the possibility of using weapons of mass destruction. Thanks to Putin, Ukrainians find inspiration in their national identity. Putin has made all the states that do not want to enter any military alliance like Sweden and Finland to reconsider. Turkey must now avoid standing next to an isolated country in the international arena, providing Ukraine with a powerful weapon, a drone. Moreover, Ankara does not want Moscow to regain control of Odessa and the Black Sea, reviving the old rivalry between the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire. Putin wants to expand Russia's borders, but he restarts the EU expansion process. In Asia, before the price Russia has to pay when invading Ukraine, China may have to hesitate to take action against Taiwan. Loan now. Even in the Middle East and Africa, countries like Syria and Mali will wonder whether to choose Russia as their patron. Will the US play a major role in the Middle East again? Saudi Arabia, like Venezuela, suddenly became important to Washington because of its oil and gas resources. Only Modi's India and Xi Jinping's China have shied away from criticizing Moscow, but in the long run, no one wants to stick their fate to an abandoned state, and in danger of bankruptcy. The world has changed in just 15 days, and an atomic or chemical escalation should be avoided while it is still salvageable. As in all wars, things don't go as planned. Vladimir Putin overestimated the effectiveness of the Russian military, disregarding the Ukrainians' patriotism, determination, and resistance, subjectivity about the risk of international sanctions. Russia has moved from illiberal democracy to dictatorship, in a regime that has institutionalized lies and terrorism. The country has now been isolated because of unprecedented sanctions, cut off the internet and ostracized by sports and culture. Despite being anti-Western, Xi Jinping showed reservations. The world economy is unstable with the explosion of oil, gas, and grain prices plus the threat of nuclear weapons creating a negative atmosphere. The Ukraine war ushered in a new Cold War that will continue, even if there is a diplomatic solution. Russia's aggression has united the West, awakened NATO, and re-established the relative balance between the United States and Europe, which, belatedly realized, would be Putin's next target after Ukraine. Finally, the world is no longer bipolar. Democracies are not prepared to confront dictatorships, but have demonstrated the ability to respond appropriately. In the long run, it is still necessary to draw up a global strategy to stop the totalitarian forces. For Russia, it means paying a heavy price for aggression, preventing escalation, maintaining contact with Russian civil society. With China, it is necessary to gradually reduce dependence on essential goods. According to Le Figaro, the EU should re-establish close cooperation with the UK on the military, re-promoting NATO. Finally, to reassure the middle class, accept the necessary sacrifices to protect freedom. But in the immediate future, the risk of Russia's debt default seems inevitable. Laekos found that all 3 credit rating agencies rated Russia as C, the final stage before falling into D, i.e. default, insolvency. Rarely does a country with little debt, accounting for 20% of GDP, find itself in this situation. The hour of truth is drawing near. March 16, Russia has to pay $117 million in bonds due, but investors have little hope. Russia's GDP is expected to decline by at least 12%. Granted, Russians are familiar with the decades of poverty in the former Soviet Union and the hyperinflation that followed the Soviet regime's collapse, but the Russian people have grown up. After the Cold War, it was difficult to accept waiting in line for many hours in front of the shops. Currently Russia has to import 20% of agricultural products and the livestock industry cannot provide enough meat for 145 million people. Russians also have to get used to a life that lacks the pillars of Western soft power. Of the 340 multinational corporations present in Russia, only a dozen or so brands in the food industry remain unresolved. Work.